Hi guys, Creative Katie, Karen Burchill here. Welcome to an art journal tutorial, another in my napkin series. I'd like to thank you, Paula, for gifting me with all these beautiful napkins, and I'm going to use this one. And I was hoping that we would be able to source out this napkin, but it seems like it's discontinued because that's after a while, sometimes the napkins do get discontinued, so you are not able to get them. But you can find another similar napkin at Minnie's Napkins and utilize it and doing the same thing that I'm doing, taking the colors from the napkin and creating your background. So I'm using a fine line brush and I am water cutting these roses out of from the rest of the napkin. And I apologize, this is off screen, but it does come back in very, very soon. And I'm auditioning, I just have an idea of putting a mandala stencil behind this and just having that as the one textural element. So it kind of frames or serves as a backdrop in front of the napkin focal image. At least that's where my ideas are coming. So I'm just fine tuning what parts of this napkin I want and what parts I don't. So I'm going in, getting rid of a little bit more of the napkin. And the secret here is to not have too much water on your brush. Needs to be wet enough to cut it, but not too wet as to wet too much of it because then it all becomes very fragile and rips away. So this stencil is called Striped Mandala. And I'm thinking instead of putting this in the corner, I'm going to put it more in the center with the mandala behind it, the butterfly at the top, and then I'm adding a rose from a different part of the napkin here. So I'm taking that napkin and basically taking it apart and putting it back together how I want it for my composition. I'm grabbing some heavy gesso here and I'm pushing it through this striped mandala stencil. You can use modeling paste or you can use a mixture of modeling paste with gesso to get that thicker, medium thickness. So I want to use something other than my Inktense or other than my acrylic paints, and I love using my Inktense blocks. They are water soluble, but they are mostly permanent when they are dry because they're ink, not watercolor. So I have them all swatched out. So I'm picking two of the colors that go well with the napkin. You saw me compare it to the napkin. So I'm just going to take these blocks and colorize it. I want to make the background the green and the red like you see in the napkin. But I don't want that behind the napkin, so I'm going to glue the napkin down on the white background right now. And I just layered. Did you see how I just layered that one on top of what was already there? And that's one of the things you can do with napkins. You create the composition. I'm adding a little bit of gesso, blurring the edges where the napkin meets the paper. And now I'm just going to scrape the Inktense block on there. Now I don't want to really mix the red and the green because that's going to make brown. It does a little bit. If it's not a color I like or intensity of brown that I don't want, I can come back and take a baby wipe and wipe it back. But I'm liking the effect here. I'm wetting my fingers. I've got water on my glass media mat, and then I'm activating the Inktense block. Rubbing that into the texture that I created by putting that heavy gesso through that stencil. Building up the intensity of colors as I go. And basically it's making it look like this whole page is roses. We have the roses that are in the forefront, the focal image from the napkin, and then the blurred ones in the distance. Adding a little bit of gesso here, adding a little bit of white. And I sped up this part because as much as, well, just stay tuned. I'm playing with the background, getting it to do what I want it, or I think I want it to do in the background. And sometimes when you have an idea, it doesn't always work out. I'm thinking I want to add, my background is a little too plain. I want some pattern in there. Was going to stencil, changed my mind. Now I'm using this stamp from Tim Holtz. I believe this is called Reflection, and it has numbers, script, as well as dictionary. Adding a little script in the background, a little bit of interest. And I'm using the black archival paint. Then I'm making the colors a little bolder. And I'm using the acrylic paint. I wasn't getting the depth of boldness that I wanted. And when I started this, the colors got a little too bold, a little too vivid. You kind of are losing the focal image a little bit here. So I think, okay, well, I'm going to do some shading around the focal image. So instead of doing my usual floating acrylic, I decide I'm going to use my General's charcoal and shade around the roses from the napkin, the focal image. I'm going inside the napkin, adding dark lines, shading. Just, I want to make this pop from the background, from those blurred, what I'm hoping people read as blurred roses. And in this shot, you can see the texture from the mandala stencil. This is an example of, just because you have an idea of how something you want something to work, it doesn't always work smoothly. You do something and it either gives you what you want or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then you have to step back. Now I want to bring up the mandala stencil. I want to bring up that texture. So I'm rubbing, I believe it's black on top of it. And if it gets smudged in some areas, you can lift it with a baby wipe. But I want to see that mandala stencil. I want it to serve as a backdrop for the focal image of the napkin. Just edging with the black that I have on my makeup sponge. I'm still thinking the background is somehow lacking something. I need something, a little something else. I try to stencil on maybe that center pattern. Not happy with that, so I wipe it back. It's acrylic paint. Then I see some bubble wrap, and I think, oh, I could just stamp on here and give that some interest. And that brightens the background a little bit, which I like. But again, it's not exactly giving me what I like. So I'm wiping it back. Adding more color. Basically getting rid of anything that was left from the bubble wrap application. So now the background has gotten way too dark. And so I make the decision to grab the gesso and paint out the entire background. Take it back to pretty much square one. Now, the benefit of this is as I'm putting the gesso and I'm just, you know, painting very haphazardly, it is adding some textural element to the background. And I decide I'm going to take the whole background and push it back, adding a couple more coats of the gesso. And this is just a matter of, it probably would have been fine the way it was, but it wasn't matching where I wanted it to be, the picture in my head. So, you know what? I'm enjoying the journey. I'm just going to put the gesso on there and try again. Not everything we attempt is going to work out perfectly the first time. And I'm using an angle brush here. I find that just makes it easier to get the paint in and around the napkin focal point. So I'm mixing the white gesso with Naples yellow, and I'm going for a much lighter background here. I'm going for more neutral. I'm trying to match it now to the colors of those daisies or white flowers at the bottom, or right now it's at the top, underneath the roses. So I'm going very, very light. I don't want the full-on Naples yellow. I just want more like a cream or beigey color. And some areas I want to be a little darker. I don't want this to look one tone. And then I'm taking the sponge and rubbing it over the stenciled area to bring out that stenciling. Globs, take it back, wipe it off, apply. I think I want to use the sepia archival ink. I try a couple different ideas. I tried this Tim Holtz one, but I absolutely do not like it. I go back and I use just a script stamp. Now I'm rubbing brown on top of this. Shading around the outside edge. Now, while I love the background here, I'm finding or I'm feeling that the focal image is just, it looks like I've just glued it on top of this background. It's not all working and blending together. Yeah, I'm doing some shading with the brown around the focal image here. I will come back and do other videos with the Inktense blocks because they are a great mixed media tool. They're very usable. This didn't work out because of other decisions I made, not because they didn't work out. Adding a little bit of black, though this is really made a difference here. I'm liking the addition of this on here, doing some shading on top of the roses as well. Some pages come together so quickly and easily, and other ones fight. And I take the yellow oxide and I'm stamping with a shelf liner onto the background, and that's adding some texture and some pattern, and I'm happier with that. Now I'm shading around elements of that mandala stencil. I want to bring that out. I want that to be more present. And especially since I added the markings on the background with the shelf liner and the script stamp, I need to do this to make that mandala stencil stand out and have a purpose on the page. And I hope you agree that right now it looks like it more fits all together than when I just did the yellow background. Sometimes you really have to tweak things, spend a lot of time finishing. I did take some time. I set this off to the side and let it sit for a while. I think this is the first time that I've shaded when I put gesso through a stencil, gone in and tried to bring out some of that. When I'm doing the napkin series or actually any video, I always like to have, one featured technique or one something new so that there's something new for you to learn in every video. I'm going to add some highlights to the roses. And I'm just using what's already on the napkin. In other videos, I do the painterly effect and I basically cover the whole flower with paint. And I chose not to do that on this one. Again, it's a different effect. I've got my sentiment here. It's from my Through the Garden Gate sentiment pack that you can get at Ninny's Napkins. And there was the butterfly that was on the napkin. And I'm just going to glue that to the top of the mandala. And the sentiment I'm going to put down at the bottom. I'm gluing that butterfly down with the fluid matte medium. And because the background is yellow, the butterfly isn't as bright pink as what it should be if I had glued that down to white. And I'm going to fix that in a bit. Now I'm splattering with the brown. So I'm thinking I'm pretty much done. Then I decide, I really like that effect where it kind of looked like the roses were in the background. And I'm taking those Inktense blocks wetting my brush and just rubbing that in a few places to get that red into the background. So my original idea kind of came around full circle. Really loved just adding that. It just made everything, in my mind, more cohesive. Maybe you liked it before. And here I'm adding some of the green in. And I think I had some red on my brush, so it was coming out more browny than green. But it's very faded. It's not as bright as where it was before I just decided, hey, you know what? I'm just going to gesso over this. Not happy, so I'm just going to take it back. Really loving how it all worked together. And I did take that Inktense block and I painted the butterfly. You might notice that it's darker here. I just added a little more pigment to it to make it a little brighter because that's what I wanted. So again, you can alter the napkin. You can change the color of the napkin. You can, but you need to make sure that it's non-porous. So put a coat of matte medium or clear gesso on it, and then you can paint it. Outlining the page and the sentiment with my Secura glaze pen. If you don't already follow me on Instagram, go to Instagram and follow me at Creative Katie. See what I'm up to day to day to day. You'll get sneak peeks of upcoming videos. Then I just didn't know when to stop, so I'm adding a little bit of line work with the gel pen on that mandala stencil. I just want it to shine a little bit more. I want it a little more present on the page. Give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment. Thanks again, Paula, for the gifts of napkins. Close-ups are coming. Get creative, everybody.